What happens when a grocery store becomes the stage for a showdown between ignorance and truth? A chance encounter between a rapper and an elderly woman turns into a moment of shocking confrontation. You won't believe how this went down. An ordinary trip to the grocery store. A sunny afternoon in Compton, California. Shoppers are lost in their daily routines, but for one man, today will become unforgettable. Snoop Dogg, the rapper who grew up in this neighborhood, casually strolls through the aisles. But little does he know, his life is about to change, and so is the life of someone else. Near the produce section, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman probably in her late 70s, stands adjusting her glasses with a hint of impatience. Dressed in a faded cardigan, her silver hair pinned with care, she seems unassuming. Yet there's something about her that suggests she's about to make her mark. Enter Snoop Dogg, casually walking by, a Compton hoodie draped over his frame, his attention on his phone. But then, the unthinkable happens. Suddenly, Mrs. Thompson turns sharply, locking eyes with Snoop. The change in her expression is immediate, sharp, and pointed. "You people don't belong here," she says, her voice cutting through the air. Snoop freezes for a moment, unsure of how to react. The grocery store, usually filled with the hum of everyday errands, is now pierced by a silence so thick it feels suffocating. Mrs. Thompson continues, her words colder than before. "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" Shoppers nearby stop in their tracks, exchanging uneasy glances, unsure of how to react. The tension is palpable, but Snoop doesn't lash out. Instead, he takes a deep breath and stands still. There's something about the way he carries himself, as if he's carefully calculating what to do next. "Ma'am," Snoop says, his voice calm but firm. "Do you even realize what you just said?" The crowd holds its breath. Snoop's eyes lock on Mrs. Thompson, but instead of anger, there's something else. A quiet determination. "Let's talk about that," he says, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You said I don't belong here, but let me tell you something about where I come from." He starts with history, with his great-great-grandfather who was born in California but brought here against his will, forced to build the very state they were in. He speaks of his grandfather, who fought in the Korean War, only to return and face a country that wouldn't offer him equal rights. His voice carries the weight of generations. "My parents fought too," Snoop continues, his tone soft but steady. "They fought by simply being who they are, by raising me to respect everyone, no matter what they look like." Snoop pauses, letting his words sink in. "You're telling me I don't belong here? That I should go back to Africa?" His voice takes on a hint of sadness. "Ma'am, I am as much a part of this country as you are. My family paid the price for it, in blood, sweat, and tears." Mrs. Thompson stands there, speechless, her hands trembling. Snoop doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't shout or storm off. He speaks calmly, but his words have the power of a hurricane. "It's not about what you meant," he says softer now. "It's about how it came across. Words matter. Actions matter even more." Snoop takes a step back, his gaze unshaken. Ignorance doesn't get better in silence. It's up to all of us to be better than this, to be better than words like those. The silence is deafening. Mrs. Thompson's face turns pale. She wants to speak but can't. Her eyes scan the crowd, looking for support, but none comes. One by one, the crowd begins to react. "I've never seen anyone handle something like that with such grace," says a young cashier, her voice breaking the tension. "You're right," says a man near the deli counter. "We've got to be better than this." Even Mrs. Thompson, though visibly shaken, seems to realize something. Her perspective shifting in the face of truth. She doesn't apologize, but the fire in her eyes has dimmed. As Mrs. Thompson wheels her cart toward the exit, The crowd disperses, but Snoop's words continue to resonate. The grocery store, once filled with awkward silence, now carries a new energy, a feeling of reflection, of growth. Later, at the checkout line, the young cashier, Ava, smiles shyly at Snoop. "What you said, it meant a lot," she says softly. Snoop returns the smile, his voice warm. Sometimes, grace is the only way to break through anger. It just builds walls. That evening, back at his home, Snoop reflects on the encounter with his crew. One friend tells him, "You planted a seed today, Snoop. People like her, they might not change overnight, but you planted a seed." Snoop nods thoughtfully. He knows that this encounter, this confrontation, is about more than just him. It's about something much bigger. Across town, Mrs. Thompson sits alone at her dining table, her mind replaying Snoop's words. For the first time in her life, she feels a pang of doubt, the weight of her assumptions pressing down on her. The seed has been planted. What happened that day in the grocery store wasn't just a moment, it was a turning point. For Snoop, for Mrs. Thompson, and for everyone who witnessed it. It was a reminder that words have power and that sometimes, standing up for what's right means speaking calmly. With conviction, we all have a choice. To remain silent or to speak out. To hurt or to heal. To divide or to unite. Let this story be a reminder that we can all make a difference, one word, one action at a time. If the story moved you, like, subscribe and comment below. Share your thoughts and let's keep the conversation going. Because the world can change and it starts with us.